Welcome to Leadership Rediscovered. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, and today I am so thrilled to be joined by Greg Clutter, who is the Director of Foster Care Initiatives for Chestnut Mountain Ranch. Greg, thanks for being on the
It is
show.
great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. After a 30-year career in business and nonprofit leadership roles, Greg joined Chestnut Mountain Ranch as Director of Foster Care Initiatives. Greg was an early supporter of the ranch and previously served on its board of directors. He and his wife, Jennifer, felt called to do more for at-risk and vulnerable children in West Virginia, and both joined the ranch full-time in July of 2021. Jennifer is a teacher at the ranch school. Prior to joining the ranch, Greg served for several years as Chief Operating Officer of a successful and growing West Virginia-based research and development services firm that focused on chemical, energy, environmental, and software technologies. In that role, he had responsibilities in many functions, including accounting and finance, information technologies, human resources, marketing, and legal disciplines. Prior to that, he served as director at an economic development and innovation-based nonprofit, which focused on diversifying the West Virginia economy. In this position, Greg was responsible for all aspects of a technology-focused commercialization and entrepreneurship program that supported, mentored, and invested in technology-based new ventures. Greg has also held past positions in commercial marketing, customer service, and operations at Nortel Networks in North Carolina and France. He also served as a senior accountant with Deloitte & Touche LLP in Charlotte, North Carolina. Greg has an MBA from the University of North Carolina's Keenan Flagler Business School and a BS in Business Administration from West Virginia University.
That's a mouthful.
Wow, it's a great listen.
Takes a lot to get 30 years in.
That's the formal bio, but I have to start with the obvious question here. You left what I would imagine is a very cushy, nice, well-paying job with benefits.
It was economically beneficial.
Economically beneficial. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your wife also left her job.
She did. She was a teacher. She still is a teacher, but she was a teacher at a local private school where we lived before. We not only moved,
right?
We moved.
Yeah.
Yes, we left cities and
I gotta hear more about
Morgantown.
this. What led to that decision, and how's it been going since you made the move?
It has been going great, and we've not questioned it for not 1 second. Sometimes we think we're crazy, but we've not questioned it for 1 second. So that it was really over a period of years. So we lived in the Charleston, West Virginia area, and being there kind of in the central part of the state and having a view to the northern part of the state and the southern part of the state, we were becoming more and more aware of the problems with foster care in West Virginia, and really the problems with substance abuse in West Virginia that was leading to more and more vulnerable children and families struggling. And we saw that. My wife was a teacher. I was on boards of local schools, private schools. We just really had this heart for kids, which reflects all the way back to while I was on the board at Chestnut Mountain Ranch many years ago. This continued. We actually were engaged with the ranch talking about the foster care issue, and I was engaged with the executive director there, Steve Finn, always talking about this and researching on my own. And this confluence of events where God just started orchestrating things where I was 13 years at my last company and love it. And it's great leadership, still continue to do amazing things. And even got to the point where I was honest with them of it's probably time for me to do something else. And while all that was going on, the ranch was trying to start this foster care initiative, and it's a nonprofit. So we had to have funding to start the foster care initiative and found some funders to come in and say, we're very passionate about this. Will you go into West Virginia Ranch and begin this new conversation about how does the church help support, keep foster families doing it longer and stronger, and also recruit more so we can make healthier vulnerable children and families when it's all said and done. So it was a calling, and at some point we just had to rip the Band-Aid off and say, if we don't do it. But it's all about leadership. So here was a moment where I was led by someone that was a dear friend of mine when I was trying to figure out what's my next step. And I had various opportunities. We were looking at things in North Carolina. We were looking here. And he asked me this one simple question. of everything that's in front of you right now, what might you look back in 20 years and say, I regret not doing that?
Ooh.
And I just immediately said, Chestnut Mountain Ranch. If I don't go try this, I'll always wonder, what if we would have done that?
Yeah.
And then as passionate as I was, I kept having to ask myself that question of, well, if not me, who?
Yeah.
Who's going to do this?
Yeah.
So, because it's not like you can go into these nonprofit worlds and say, we need somebody to start a brand new initiative and go raise funding for it and put it in place. It's just not something anybody wants. There's just not a ton of people that want to do it or can do it.
Right.
So anyhow, God had given me certain gifts. The timing came about. And, we're in the middle of the move, and we're going from the nice big house and a nice little community into a small town home. And it was sometimes we thought we were crazy, but it's been a wonderful experience.
That's amazing. Well, and when I listen to you talk about it, I think about what a transition to make in all aspects, like you said, even in your life of where you live and how you live and all of that. But what was that transition like for you? I know you had previous nonprofit experience, but to go from a mostly corporate business background.
Yes, established nonprofits.
Yeah, a for-profit to, nonprofit. Yeah. What's that transition?
The biggest transition was, okay, I know what the marketing plan is. I know how we're going to do this. I know now, and I would stop and go, okay, now where's the team? So it became a lot of self-leadership and a lot of, okay, now how do I there's very limited resources. We are in the process now of thinking about how do we add other people, but there's very limited resources. So it's always time being the most limited resource. So it's always, what's first things first?
Yeah.
What's the most important thing to focus on? And that's changed I've been doing this about a year now. And early on it was, what's our operational methods? What part of the problem are we going to solve? How do we break this down? This huge problem of 7,000 kids in foster care. How do we start breaking this down to make it meaningful so we can have a real impact on it?
Yeah.
Which is sometimes the job of a leader, to take this big impossible vision and say, now here's how we tackle it. We go one step at a time.
Yeah.
So we had to start there because we had caught the bus. We were the dog that caught the bus. We've been chasing it forever, and all of a sudden, there it is. How do we do this?
Now what?
And it's been a great process, and we've met a lot of other national leaders going through the process, because there are people in this space all over the country that are diving in and saying, how do we take care of vulnerable kids and children? How do we do a better job as a country, and particularly as faith-based organizations, as a church?
Yeah.
And we've met amazing people doing this all over the place, which is sometimes what innovation is and entrepreneurship. It is find something that's working somewhere else and bring it to where you are.
Right. No sense in recreating the wheel if you don't have to.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what I like to focus on in this podcast is just different forms of leadership, how different people define leadership, and opportunities for leadership. So I would like for you to talk a little bit more about the Village and just what it is and what the opportunities are in terms of leadership there, because it's a unique approach, I think.
It is very unique. So just first of all, to go after that phrase, the Village.
Yeah.
So this is so much different what we're doing. Chestnut Mountain Ranch has been in place for 15 years, and at its core, it's a home and school. It's a Christ-centered home and school for boys and their families to provide hope and healing. And that core mission is the boys come and they work with their families the entire time, and they live for a season in a home with house parents. They go to school in very small classrooms, very hands-on education, because they're very often behind socially, behind academically. So we're wrapping these two elements around them to support. And then we're also working with them through our Family Life Center, where we have people coming in and doing just core life skills coaching and counseling with the boys and the families. So the families are part of it. So we're trying to break those generational bonds. But the core element to that is really this very supportive, very structured community around them. That's a Christ-centered community. As you can tell, we're a faith-based organization, and we are not shy about that. It's a Christ-centered community that comes around them, and we've seen success. When you surround these families and you start giving them tools and giving them support, it works. So when I came in as the first person of this new element, we said employee number one with a little employee badge that says 001. When I came in, we looked and said, okay, what are we doing now? Well, that model of taking communities and surrounding families. We know that works. So we began to explore, how do we do that on a larger scale with foster families, starting off everybody we talked to in the state of West Virginia, and probably would be the same if you went across the nation. What's one of the biggest issues with the foster care system? Not enough families. Just not enough families will step up. It's hard. It's messy. It's just really difficult for people to step into. So we started looking across the nation of how are other places doing this. And we landed on using the church and guiding and equipping and leading the local church of how do you support the families that are in your community that are already doing this, and how do you surround them so they foster longer and they foster stronger and they stay in the fight. The vast majority of foster families stop within 1 year. 50% within 1 year, they stop.
Okay. Why is that?
It is hard. It's very hard. It's also bureaucratic. It's also, many people go into it with the wrong expectations, where they think they're going to save a child. And foster care at its core is about reunification, to try to make that core, that primary, that biological family stronger, give them time to get back on their feet. Sometimes those issues with those families is just really messy, and it's just a hard space to be. So when they go further, within 2 years, 80% of them stop. The good news is some of them stop because they adopt from foster family and then they're out. But a lot of them, it's just really difficult to do. A lot of them feel alone when they get out there and they do it. Who do you turn to say, how do I handle this? Infrastructure in the state is overwhelmed. The child welfare professionals are overwhelmed. Agencies themselves that help place foster families, they're overwhelmed. So we're taking this model and we've partnered with other organizations so we don't have to recreate the wheel. And we're going kind of church by church, and we're equipping them and guiding them. How do you take care of these families? And what we've seen, the data says, when we take care of these families, they stay in it, so that within 2 years, 90% of them are still doing it.
Wow.
So it flips the script, completely flips the script. So we saw that and we said, okay, there's the answer. Retention is recruitment. We're also seeing, with a lot of success with the early churches that we're in right now, is those families. So if you take 4 families and you wrap around another family and say, help them prepare meals, go mow the lawn, do laundry, help them with childcare, just support them. Sometimes just be there, a listening ear, somebody they can pick up the phone and say, here's my situation. We're seeing those families that surround, they start getting their questions answered about foster care. They start getting closer to these kids, and some of the myths start getting dispelled. The way it really works starts becoming clearer. So we're seeing several of those families now go, okay, I'll foster.
I'll do it too, which I think is so fascinating, because there are, of course, agencies and programs out there just trying to get people to become foster families. And that's not necessarily what the Village is all about, although it's a really cool,
it is a
indirect
cool model.
Effect that is happening.
So we call this the Village, which is a ministry of the ranch, put that in air quotes, a ministry of Chestnut Mountain Ranch, because it is so distinctly different than a home and school. But yet it's all in that realm of pulling these Christ-centered communities together to help vulnerable kids and families. That's the overall thing that it's a mission. So that is the mission of the Village. We're creating Christ-centered communities to provide hope and homes for vulnerable kids and families. In West Virginia.
In West Virginia.
We have the worst problem in the nation with this.
I did want to ask about that, because I know I've seen it reported 7,000 children in foster care in West Virginia. But how does that kind of stack up against other states, in the nation?
That number puts us, in terms of a pure number, almost on the pure numbers of some very much larger states. And that's because our per capita number is the highest in the nation.
Okay, that's what I was curious about, because obviously West Virginia is not the most populous state. So 7,000 out of, I was curious how that worked. So not good.
And then, so that's in the foster system, foster care system itself. If we take kind of that next layer of, we are very family oriented in West Virginia, especially grandparents. There's something about that generation. So that the numbers vary in terms of the estimates, but the number that we kind of look at as a midpoint is about 40,000 children where their their grandparents are the primary source of their care.
Wow.
So there's about 40,000 kids primarily living with grandparents.
Okay.
And grandparents are taking care of the
That's a
kids
huge
primarily.
number.
So these grandparents that have prepared all their lives to be grandparents now are parents again.
Our parents, yeah. And they need support.
They need support. And they very often don't have the option of, I'm going to go and turn in my foster care card.
Right.
They're in it for the long term. And if
Yeah.
they get to a point where they're struggling,
Mm-hmm.
it can be that the kids go back into the system
Mm-hmm.
because there's no place else
Mm-hmm.
outside of the direct family, or they just can't do it well.
Yeah.
They just can't do it stronger. So we talk about longer and stronger. The church can
That's
help them to go
amazing.
longer and stronger.
Yeah, and I think it provides another opportunity for people who maybe aren't in a position where they can be a foster family,
Yes.
but still want to help in some way or
That's
get
exactly
involved,
right.
thinking differently about how you can contribute. So
Yes.
maybe it is around supporting those
It
foster
is.
families, within your church or within your
And
community or wherever, and being such an incredible resource for them.
yes. That's what when we go into churches, it is an opportunity to do a ministry. We call them family advocacy ministries because they all
Yeah.
look a little bit different.
Right.
It's an opportunity to participate in something that may be near and dear to you
Mm-hmm.
without taking that full step of being a foster family.
Mm-hmm.
You can go cook the meals. Everybody has different gifts and different skills and different setup in the way they're created. So they're able to do something. Everybody can do something. It's
Yeah.
something that's a little phrase we give all the time. We talk about everybody can do something. And across
Yeah.
the nation, you hear that
Wow.
that everybody in a church can do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually not hard to go into a church and say, do you understand this is a problem? Step one. Do you understand that you should be helping?
Yeah.
And then they turn to, how do we help? That's what the village is doing.
Amazing.
We're just helping them figure it
It's a
out.
community.
Guiding and equipping. Yeah. How do you build the communities?
I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
so cool.
It is cool.
So I think about, from a career perspective, people want typically to work for an organization that has an inspiring mission,
Yes.
something that, they can really contribute to and be a part of something bigger than themselves.
Yes.
And I can't think of, a more noble mission than what you're doing right now. But
Right.
how do you balance? I mean, to me, I would feel like you may feel pressure to perform, at a certain level because you're, so passionate about the mission. So how do you kind of balance?
It is such an important thing that I found myself very early when I came into this. You talked about the transition from kind of the corporate world to this. I came in and I'm like, I see the problem. I know how we're going to fix it. Let's go.
Right.
Let's go. Let's go. But in this work, relationships are the foundation. Community's over everything. We say people over process.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, it's always people over process.
Yeah.
So community's at the core of everything we do. And that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes time, even for us, to go into a church and say, let's explain the issue. Let's talk about it. Sometimes it's a very different way of thinking,
Yeah.
even for the pastors and for the leaders, or the lay leaders, as we might call them. And it just takes time. It's not something you can't walk into a church and snap your fingers and say, pull those 8 people and put them over here and they're going to help this foster family.
Right.
The foster family's going, I don't even know you people. You're not coming in my house. I'm not gonna show you literally my dirty laundry so you can
Yes.
wash it.
Yeah, exactly.
It just takes time
Yeah.
to build those things. So relationships and that idea of being related to the person in some way, or related to that community in some way, it has to progress the way it has to progress.
Which takes time.
Which was a big challenge for me. It still continues to be a challenge because I'm going, this is a huge issue. How do we impact it? We can do things up front though. And we've done one of those recently where we hosted a large event here in Morgantown, the All in Foster Care Summit, where we brought churches together and we brought some national leaders and state leaders and foster families. And we just spent a day where they could just drink from the fire hose and learn about the issues nationally, learn about them locally, be reminded of what they're supposed to be doing on taking care of widows and orphans, and then just start a little bit of that how. So we can do some of that awareness at scale,
Right.
but then that working and guiding and equipping them is just step by step, by step.
Yeah.
It's very different work for a lot of churches.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, that relationship building, and it takes time. And I think, honestly, though, that's a huge lesson, because to me, so much of leadership is about impact and influence
It is.
wherever you are, in whatever
It
type of
is.
organization. Any lessons to share about how you've gone about building those relationships? Because I do think relationship management is an important
It is.
skill set.
It's funny because every case is different.
Mhm.
Every church is different. Some have come to us and said, "We heard about this. We want to go." Well, in the
Yeah.
business world, those are early adopters. They
Yeah.
come. It's the same thing. Others, it's been just spending multiple lunches, spending
Mhm.
time with them, learning what they're already doing, and just pointing to, well, here's something else you could do, or just being a
Yeah.
guide. I'm very much about, let's just guide them and
Mhm.
equip them. Are there some tools they can use?
Yeah.
Some take a long time to get there. But using networks, because of my background where I've been at different places in the
Yes.
state, it's been the unique orchestration of my experiences to go, oh, I know people in Charleston. I know people in Huntington. I've met people in this
Mhm.
other part of the state. And I know a lot right here where we are.
Yeah.
So using those networks for other purposes.
Mhm.
And sometimes the story of, you're doing what? Why are you over there? Sometimes that story is enough to get them
Yeah, people get
just
curious.
intrigued. Yes.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, this idea of self-care for people in nonprofits is a big deal,
Yes.
because you can get burnout. You can try
Sure.
to save the world.
Well, just like what you are indicating about the foster families that
Yes.
stop, I feel like,
Yes.
it can be a very emotionally taxing
It can.
environment, and same with running a
It
nonprofit can be very emotionally taxing too.
Yeah. And during this time right now, we're in this strange place where the whole country's talking about mental health right now.
Yes.
We're all talking about mental health.
Yes.
And I look, and I had probably already gotten to this point in my last position
Mhm.
where it was just the burnout was starting to come.
Yeah.
It was tiring. We had just led an entire company through COVID. We were starting to come back to the office. Some
Mhm.
people weren't coming, some were coming. I would just encourage leaders to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
You can't lead if you're not healthy.
No.
You just cannot lead if you're not healthy.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very good advice, because
Yes.
I do think there's a lot of people right now who are in that burnout state. And,
Yes.
and it all ties again to the conversation on mental health, I think, as well.
Yes.
So your LinkedIn profile is super cool, by the way.
Thank you.
Everyone should go follow Greg on LinkedIn. We'll have links to you. But your LinkedIn tagline says servant leader, change agent, purveyor of purpose, James 127 advocate. So I would love to hear what this means about you, and, especially from a leadership context.
Yeah. The one that's probably the most unique out of that is this phrase of purveyor of purpose.
Yeah.
I think if there's been anything along my leadership journey that I've learned, it's
Mhm.
more and more, a leader can't stand up and just say, they're going over there.
Right.
In some environments you can, where it's
Follow me.
necessary to be speedy
Sure.
and move. You can. Especially now, we want purpose. I mean,
Mhm.
leadership, I used to think leadership was that thing. I'm going to create this vision and we're going to go over there. I've learned that if you want to take someone over there,
Mhm.
it has to be wrapped in this concept of purpose. Some of it is what's in it for me.
Yeah.
But really, the idea for purpose is, for me, is this concept of, it's something meaningful to the person
Mhm.
as an individual, but there's also something meaningful beyond the person.
Yeah.
It's why you see social entrepreneurship popping up everywhere. It's why large corporations are saying, if you do this, Tom's Shoes, what a great example. If you buy our shoes, we're going to give
Yes.
away a pair of shoes.
Yes.
It's just this beautiful idea of, you're going to be part of something, you're going to get some benefit, but you're going to do something
gonna
beyond
help.
yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like in leadership, very often there's almost this crisis of purpose, where if you have a company and you're trying to motivate people with money and benefits and all those,
Mhm.
something beyond the self is
Yes.
what ultimately motivates people even more, where they can be
Yes.
part of something bigger. So as I've worked with even small companies, I use the Simon Sinek
Mhm.
phrase. You
Love
start with
Simon.
why. Just start with why.
Yes.
What is your why? Which is, when we go to churches right now as part of the village, we start with that why, and they have a very big why.
Mm.
The reason you exist, what you're doing, how we're living as a church, and the people we claim to be.
Yeah.
The core of that why is also why we should be taking care of widows and orphans.
It connects. It's all
It
connected.
is. It is. So servant leadership is that idea of, I mean, even in what I do now, I'm not the hero of the story. The village is not the hero of the story. It's the people in the church. It's the foster families. It's those, very often it's the kids that have overcome more than anyone.
Yes.
But it's this kind of guiding and equipping and moving them along. And then change agent. I think I tie leadership to change. I have a very hard time seeing the difference between somebody that leads and somebody that's a change agent, because there is so much of it of saying, there's the picture. That's where we're going.
Yeah.
Here's why it matters. Here's why it's better than where we are now.
Yeah.
So let's start taking a step. Just that next step. Just one thing at a time, making it very digestible.
Well, that's it. I like that distinction, because a lot of times I talk about the difference between manager and leader, management and leadership. And I do feel like that change component is a key differentiator between just managing the day-to-day versus, trying to go to that next.
Really
place.
is.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where there's a plan and there's a details and you're checking them off, and that gets into the management piece.
Sure, which is still, we all have to do that
Absolutely.
as leaders.
But constantly pointing people to the big why. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's better. Here's how life's going to get better in the business world, it's the customers.
Yeah.
In my world, this is how life's going to be better for children and families.
Yeah. And those are your customers.
Those are my customers. Yeah.
Whew. Talk about purpose.
Absolutely.
Wow. All right. Well, something else that I noticed on your LinkedIn page is that you have a very impressive volunteer background. And it's not like the check the box, I'm going to serve on this board or, be in this role. But you've done big things in a volunteer capacity. And one thing that caught my eye in particular was Joshua's Men.
Joshua's Men.
Will you talk about that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Joshua's Men is a year-long leadership program. It's in the title. It's for men. Where the main purpose of Joshua's Men is back to churches. It's really run through churches. This idea that if churches aren't bringing up leaders, the next generation of leaders, and very purposefully, with a lot of intention, that you're going to get to, it's succession planning, and it's just succession planning
from
the HR world.
Yes.
But churches have a hard time of who are those people that can come along next, and maybe go lead a Christ-centered nonprofit ministry.
Yes.
Maybe go lead something in the community like, I knew I was going to hit this. Maybe lead something in the community like a Fellowship of Christian Athletes. But if we aren't equipping these people to do that, we're going to have a gap. So Joshua's Men has been around a very long time. As a matter of fact, the first time I took it here in Morgantown, West Virginia.
So is this a national?
It is national.
Okay,
I've
never heard of it.
It's out of 12 Stone Church. A gentleman named Dan Ryland has been part of it. So there's big leadership focus out of 12 Stone Church. Just a huge leadership focus. John Maxwell, the John Maxwell Leadership Center is associated with that.
Okay.
So, but Dan Ryland started this, literally 30 years ago, maybe 35 now. And the idea was, let's pour into men for a year in a very structured way. And there ends up being multiple themes, but some of it starts out with spiritual self-discipline, self-leadership. We read a book every month. We're doing activities every month. You have to give a speech and give a persuasive essay type thing. You end up you have to call another leader and interview them, write letters to your family around leadership. So, and we use Maxwell books, 5 Levels of Leadership kind of kicks it off. We use a book by Foster called Celebration of Discipline, which is really around spiritual disciplines. Spend a lot of time on that, around getting the foundation right as a man in the church. How do we do that? Then one of my favorite books, and if I've read it over and over again, we go through Andy Stanley's Visioneering, which is this idea of how do you know what that seed is? How do you know when you're seeing, like for me, when I first said, I'm sensing this. I keep thinking about
Yes.
this. How do I start going toward that? So it's a 12-month journey. And I did this many years ago. Oddly enough, the gentleman that led my group here in Morgantown back 15 years ago was Steve Finn, who's the founder of Chestnut Mountain Ranch.
Oh, and now
So it all comes back full circle.
full circle.
And and in terms of my leadership journey, this was one of those moments where I had set. We lived in Tays Valley, West Virginia. I was working in Charleston, West Virginia, and I was starting to see this in terms of where the leaders coming from in the church. And I'd hesitated. I had a busy job, and we were raising kids, and I hesitated forever of going, how does this get done? Maybe we could do Joshua's men. And I just kind of stood there waiting to go. And finally, I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to go take this to our church leadership and see if they're interested.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I walk in to one of the senior pastors and I say, I'm thinking about this. And he looks at his whiteboard and he says, do you see that thing up there and this little, the notes up here in the corner? We just had a conversation about this and we're wondering how we're going to do this. So now we started that many years ago in Tays Valley, and there are, I don't know, 70, 75 men have been through it. And there's a group, there's 3 groups going on right now. So
this is for men, not young men, like
it
children.
It is largely focused to men that also have leadership roles in their families. So very often it's married men that have kids. We spend a lot of time talking about leading families. Just the idea of how do these men and their spouses lead their family? How do they do it? And how do they do it strongly? And how do they finish well in terms of all the way through? The kids are young, the kids are here, now they're in college, and you're an empty nester at some point. So we go through that whole process, and we've seen such great results where people have stepped out and done career changes. Or probably one of the best is when we had a young man stand up and say, my family for generations has been plagued by things, alcoholism and not healthy families. And he says, I'm stopping it now.
Breaking the cycle.
I'm breaking this cycle. And my leadership commitment is to my family, which is that place where we all have level 5 leadership, in the words of John Maxwell. It's one of the few, most of us, that's going to be the only place where we're level 5 leaders.
Right.
We're not like John Maxwell or Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
Where most of the place, that's where we're going to do it.
Home.
It's going to be in the home. So he made a recommitment to that. So it's such a powerful program. And I kind of teetered thinking, do we start it? Do we not start it? And once we got it started, the people that came around it got so excited that it multiplied. It went to a couple churches, and then it was kind of multiple churches all in one place. And so it's been such a cool experience.
That's amazing. Well, I'd never heard of it, so that tells me we need more of it.
We need more of it. So if it's on 12 Stone Church's webpage, they make everything available. They make coaching available, and it's just cool. All the curriculum is there.
All right, so more opportunities for leadership.
Opportunities for leadership.
Go out there and start one of these within their church. Is that typically
within their church? Usually it starts within a church, and then it tends to quickly spread.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, thanks for talking about that.
That's one of my favorite things. That was the thing that got me, that really, when I started teaching it. Talk about a great way to lead is start teaching, and then you're having to stare at yourself in the mirror and say, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Do I really do this? So, and we talk about purpose, and the whole time we talk about purpose. What's your purpose? What are your spiritual giftings? And where's God leading you? Where can you be most useful to God's kingdom? I mean, that's where we're driving the entire time. And for me, I had to just like look in the mirror and go, are you doing any of this? You've got all these guys over here, and now I'm hands off of it, and God just keeps it going, and the local men keep it going. That's amazing. It's in hundreds. There have been thousands of men that have been through that program.
That's huge, because I think sometimes I get caught up in the, I got to do more. I'm not doing big enough things, or I'm not doing as much as I should be doing every day. And then sometimes I just stop myself and think, I am a mother, and maybe today it's really about, what am I doing in my home? How am I showing up as a leader in my home, as opposed to all the things that I'm trying to accomplish outside of the home as well. So I think we
Yes.
get lost in that
We
sometimes.
get very lost in that. So I have two. I have twin boys that are now just finished their sophomore year here at WVU.
Oh, wow.
And I look at what they're doing now,
Mm-hmm.
and they have very different paths they're going down in terms of career wise, and how they're impacting people and what they're doing. And I go, okay, it was no doubt the most important thing I did.
Wow. That's awesome. Very good.
They are such cool young men.
That's amazing. Well, and that's a testament to you and your wife as parents.
Mostly her. It's mostly my wife. It's mostly Jennifer. She'd tell you the same thing.
I love it. Well, I feel like we've kind of danced around this question, but I do like to find out from each guest what their definition of leadership is. So I do want to hear your very specific definition.
Yes, and it is that idea of painting a picture, painting a vision, and pointing to what's better over there, and then how do we get there? So sometimes a lot of leaders can say, "This would be better. Wouldn't it be great if we did this? If we did this? If we did that?"
Yeah,
it's more than that. It's building a path to it and showing people how. But mostly, it's showing them why it matters and why it should matter to them. And it's all surrounded in this is better. This is more purposeful. This is where we go. So I know that's not real succinct, but it's all around that. I could go, John Maxwell says it's influence. Well, yeah, that's influencing people to go. But I think it's deeper than influence. I can influence someone to take a step, to take an action one time.
You could also influence someone to do something bad.
And a lot of leaders have done that, where they influence them to do, don't be transparent. Don't just go do this thing for your own benefit.
Exactly.
But yet this idea of taking them towards a bigger purpose, that's going to be, that's like the self-perpetuating engine. It doesn't stop. Yeah. It is once they get that. And then your job is just to remind and encourage and check that they're on track. But also, one mistake I've made in my career is that's not necessarily a goal. You got to have goals. Yeah. You got to have goals. You got to have steps and objectives and measure that. You got to have all that. But if this thing's defined as a possibility more than that's your goal, that's where you're going, possibility is always still possible. It's possible for us to go over there. We can go over there. We can have setbacks and breakdowns. We can do that. But we can still keep going over here.
Sure.
And it may not be a year that we get there. But organizations and people can do a lot in 10 years.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes. But it comes back to that patience that especially you're dealing with right now as, probably building out your patience muscle because you're right. I think, and especially in a corporate world or in a for-profit world, a lot of this is quarter to quarter to quarter. If you're publicly traded, it's, what have we done this quarter? It doesn't matter what you did last quarter anymore.
Exactly
it's
right.
What are you doing? And so that's a short time interval to make a difference.
Yeah. And we're
it's
seeing
not 10 years.
Organizations, and even from the investment side, where people are saying, I want to invest in things that make more of a difference.
Yeah.
I want to work for an organization that has more of a purpose, that makes more of a difference than just the profit. And some of that's a kind of a cultural shift we're seeing as the younger generation sees that differently.
Yeah.
Very differently.
Yes.
And they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, which I think is a breath of fresh air because, and we also see, again, being in what I do, that those younger folks that don't have a purpose, that when you ask them what's their purpose, and they go, I don't know. They're the ones that tend to have more academic trouble. The ones that aren't future oriented, they have more academic problems. They have more social problems. They can struggle.
That vision of
they
where
can't
they're
see
going.
it. There is a direct tie, and there was some great work done researching this out of Stanford University many years ago. Great book called Path to Purpose by Dr. Bill Damon, and he's part of the Center for Adolescence. That's what it's called. They study adolescence. And they looked and they said, there's this definite strong correlation between those kids that say, I want to go do this and accomplish this, and this is what I want to do, whether that's career or family, or it can be, I want to get $10,000 in the checking account, something that's future oriented that they're driving toward, a goal, a purpose. That there's a definite correlation between that and later healthy families and healthy relationships and good careers and all those things. So that's my little purpose.
But you're right, and we're seeing it over and over
We
and over
are.
again, especially with the two newest generations in the
Yes,
workplace, or the youngest generations, I guess I should
absolutely.
say, wanting that. And I love it. I think it's great, but it's causing some
It
friction.
is. It
And
is.
it's a different way of
Yes,
leading and
it
managing
is.
and rewarding and motivating. I
Yeah.
mean, it's turning a lot of things upside down, but I think
Yeah.
for the better
It's even important at
ultimately.
the consumer level. And one thing that the leadership at Chestnut Mountain Ranch has done is there are two social enterprises in our little community here in Morgantown. One of which is the Ranch Quick Lube.
Oh
Change
yes.
your oil, change your life. That is Ranch Quick Lube. Change your oil, change your life.
I love this.
It is still part of the ministry. It's incredibly well staffed and incredibly well managed. And very often you go there and your 12-minute oil change, you have to wait because there's so many cars coming through. And it's broken records from Valvoline Corporate where they've looked and said, how do you do this? That store should not be able to do this. It shouldn't be attracting this much. Well, they're changing their oil to change a life. They know that it's here. Their money's staying here in the community.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the purpose of the Ranch Quick Lube is the profits from that go to help the kids at the ranch.
And I love that model because I
It
think that's
is.
such an interesting way to approach and sit between the two worlds of
Absolutely.
for profit, not for profit, or
And
nonprofit.
it's also innovation and leadership in terms of how do you do something like Chestnut Mountain Ranch, which has no debt, no state funding, no federal funding. It's all
Amazing.
privately funded. How do you do that model in a smaller community? We have to get very creative and innovative. So there's also the Ranch Community Store, which is a thrift store.
Yes.
And people come and donate things, and then the community store sells it and profits from that in the same way. The Quick Lube has gotten so popular that the ranch is actually opening another location
Wow.
over the next few months, just because the community can handle it.
That's
And they're open
amazing.
one on the other side of town. So anyhow, that is just living testament to what you say. Even people want to spend their money
Yes.
in a way
Yes.
that's more meaningful.
Yes. Work for a place and spend their money with businesses that
Yes.
are making a difference, making an impact. And also, I feel like you're teaching the boys what's possible, what's out there. Because I think sometimes when you were talking about children not having a purpose or not, sometimes I think they just don't even know what the possibilities
That's-
are. They've not been exposed maybe
Yeah.
to what's out there and what's possible. So you're showing
Yeah.
just a taste of what's possible.
That's one of those leadership lessons and moments and little phrases that I use.
Yeah.
And it is, you can't be it if you can't see it. People, you can't be it if
Ooh,
you can't
wait,
see it.
Do that one more time.
You can't be it if you can't see it. So the job of a leader is to paint, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
But if you can't paint that picture vividly or give examples of this is how your life could be better. So great example of this at Chestnut Mountain Ranch is just yesterday, myself and two of the teachers from the ranch took two of our boys that were selected very purposefully, that have shown leadership attributes that are really going to be kind of the next leaders at the ranch for the boys there. We took them for a leadership trip to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And it's a very purposeful 2 days. They got to sit in the office of Senator Capito,
Nice.
who was so gracious, gave us like 30 minutes spending time with the boys.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen in most parts of the country. We she really asked them questions and they were engaged, and the adults are just sitting there and they're having this conversation back and forth, which was just wonderful. But the boys had questions they had to ask. They had certain expectations. They're wearing their ties. They're wearing their suits.
They were ready.
And then we got to spend some time with a longtime friend of the ranch who works for a congressman there on the Hill. And he gave us a tour of the Capitol. He took us to the Library of Congress, gave us a midnight tour. I say midnight. It was after dark tour of all the monuments and his
Ooh,
history.
That's pretty.
And these boys, we walked 12 miles one day.
Wow.
These are teenage boys. They're middle
Yeah.
school and a high school boy. And they were engaged the entire time. And we just set the expectations very high, but they're engaged with these people that are leaders. They're national leaders. They're doing very important things. And we're standing at the Lincoln Memorial.
I was going to say so much history around
and we're hearing about
leadership.
this, and we're hearing about the Washington Monument, and we're walking around, and here's the World War II Memorial and the Korean, which is just an eerie, beautiful thing, the Korean Monument, Korean Memorial. But that's something that we do so they can see it. And now they've seen
See
something.
what's possible.
And they're meeting other people that are doing other things.
Yeah.
But if you can't see it, you can't be it. And a lot of families and communities that are in smaller places, if they can't see it, here's a career option. This is the way a healthy family looks like.
Yeah.
This is what a family that's doing, that isn't wrapped up in things that are self-destructive.
Yeah.
So what it looks like.
Yeah.
And if
Positive
if they can see it, then they can be it.
Yeah, I think that's a good challenge to anyone who's listening to this, who is in a leadership capacity, which we all are.
Yes.
Multiple leadership capacities. But I think it's a good challenge to make that leadership more visible.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times there is quiet leadership. There's humble leadership,
There
servant
is.
leadership, which is all very important and something that I agree with and support. But at the same time, if it's so hidden and so quiet that you maybe are holding back on the impact it can have on other people to inspire others.
Absolutely.
One thing I am curious about, that decision that you and your wife made to really make a major change, that was a very courageous decision. And I think there's probably people out there who want to make a decision like that, but maybe are afraid to go through with it. So what advice would you give people who maybe, are in that situation right now?
What a great question. And I always say that the entire journey is just a step and a step and a step and a step. So you can, just start learning. Just you feel called to something, you're interested in something, just take a step.
Yeah.
Start learning. Talk to somebody that's in the space. One of the biggest steps for me in thinking about this was I was in Atlanta, Georgia, visiting friends over a holiday. And I made a call to one of the local organizations doing this kind of work. And one of their vice presidents met me for breakfast. It was New Year's Eve. We meet for breakfast. And we're talking about caring for vulnerable children and families. But that was just a step. And then just staying engaged with the conversation with Chestnut Mountain Ranch and being part of it. If you feel that pull, that tug, I don't think that's by accident. It is just, there's something about you and the way you're created and the way you're designed that you're being pulled toward that. So it starts with this kind of longing. It starts with this, something's in the world that should be different.
Yeah.
It's leadership, huh? It's back to that. There's something going on in the world that should be different.
Change.
And that's something we did in Joshua's Men, was we spent the book Visioneering, which I mentioned is a study of the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. That's the whole story of Nehemiah. He was not a prophet. He wasn't this person working miracles. He was just a regular guy. He had a pretty important job, but he worked with the king, and he started just feeling this. I'm saddened and I'm broken by that. Something going on. And then the whole story is him going and taking a challenge. And it's a book in the Bible about a project manager. To be honest, he was a great project manager.
I can see why you might like it.
Yeah, he was a great project manager. So,
but that's such, I do think when we talk about purpose and we talk about, because I work with a lot of people who are trying to figure out sometimes what is my purpose. Yeah. They know maybe they're not happy where they currently are, but they're not quite sure. They don't have that vision yet. Yeah. And there's a lot of literature and research out there that talks about what are the things that break your heart? What are the things that make you angry? You use some of that terminology.
Yes.
Where are you feeling that tug or that stirring around, this isn't right, this needs to be changed.
Yes. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I just could go on and on and on and on with you.
That's great.
Hey, what have we not covered? Because I think, you have such an incredible story, and I want to honor that story. So
yeah, about my leadership journey. You hit it in terms of thinking about servant leadership and being a quiet leader. And when I kind of started a leadership journey, it was reluctant. It was really? So it was go all the way back to like high school, and I was class president for a few years, and then student body president. When I was on campus here, I was president of like kind of our local professional honor organization. And it was one of those things where I was placed into this. I wasn't campaigning. I wasn't doing that kind of stuff. It was just these leadership opportunities were popping up, and I would do the best I could. I just, I'd help organize this event or do something like that. And I don't think I really even understood leadership until I was given an opportunity to understand that, which was at Nortel
Oh, yes.
many years ago. It was my first job out of graduate school from University of North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in this program called the Operations Leadership Development. See how that was purposeful? Operations Leadership Development Program,
Yes.
OLDP, which was a great program that literally took and put people that had potential in leadership positions and just made them lead.
Hmm.
So I found myself in this position of running this project, which was it was a project to demonstrate to a lead customer and other customers this new high technology, the latest and greatest thing called voice over IP. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
dating myself a little bit.
Yes. Fancy.
Fancy stuff, which is like everything we do. I mean, it's all over IP now.
Right.
But we were doing this customer demonstration lab.
Yeah.
But we were developing the technology at the same time we were putting this lab in place, and we had some customer demonstrations scheduled for that lab at a certain time. So they said, go make that lab happen. Here's your team.
Mm-hmm.
My technology team was in Dallas and Toronto. I worked for somebody that was in Toronto. Another part of our technology team, kind of the core technical and service leadership, was in Europe. The customer and their lab was in Denver. And this was before Zoom. There was no Zoom.
Yeah.
There was no Zoom.
Last week.
I was, I had a CPA and I'd come out of Deloitte and I had a finance background and had gone through an operations program at the University of North Carolina, which was just fabulous. And I was put in this position, go make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the guys that sat in Toronto saying, you can do this.
Yeah.
And I found myself going, I'm not the technical guy. I'm not the service guy.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even seen the real estate where we're putting the lab. So I'm dealing with the facilities people. All I could do was put a structure in place, put communication channels in place, and encourage them and just keep saying, there's where we're going.
Yes.
There's where we're going.
Yes.
This is what we're going to do. And this is why it's so good. Mm-hmm. This is why it's so good. And there were a couple moments in that where it was like these big, oh my goodness, that really worked. One was in Denver at this customer lab where the team was developing the product as we were trying to do this, literally. And we're in this lab, it's 2 a.m. Denver time, and we're on a phone, and we're trying to complete calls. And I'm on the phone, and the guy sitting by the computer writing the code, he gets on his little headset, and we complete a call. It was like this moment of, that just worked. And it wasn't like one of these great historical moments where the first words, my first words, I think, were like something like, oh my goodness, I hear you. But it was one of those moments. I'm like, huge. That just worked. Yeah. And then we put it in the lab, and we were able to do the demonstrations. But my job there it wasn't even project manager. Mm-hmm. I didn't know enough. Mm-hmm. I knew enough to say, okay, what's your schedule? R&D team. Okay, what's your schedule? And start putting them together and saying, okay, this won't work. You have to have this done. So some of it was kind of project management, but a lot of it was, what do you need? Do you need more resources? Do you need more people? You guys are doing great. And then being there at the end of that, when we did do the demonstrations, and they went very well, and we got customers out of that process. But that was the first time where I stopped and said, I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't write the code. I can't write
I'm not the subject matter expert.
Not the subject matter experts, but I have this whole team around me that knows how to build out a lab. They know how to work with that real estate. They know how to do this. I've got the sales team that's over here, knows how to work with that. So it was just one of those moments where it was, oh, that's
so
it.
This is leadership.
That's what it is. And but that's just one of those stories that I like to tell, because before that I was doing the work, which is important. Yes. That's self-leadership. That's where you design it. But that moment was where it kind of clicked.
It clicked. Well, and just as an outsider looking in, as I look at your journey and your story, I feel like everything that you've done has just built to where you are today and what you're doing today.
It's just amazing. It's nothing short of a miracle for me to go building things. I mean, just this idea of leading to build, and now I'm stepping into this and I'm saying, this is a huge problem. but the world can be better.
Yeah.
And how can we just build community under it to make it better?
That's amazing. Well, thank you for that
thank
very,
you.
very
Yes, you're
important
very welcome.
work that you're
It's-
doing. And hopefully this will inspire other people to
Yes.
get
Just take one step.
involved. Yeah, one step.
Just take the next step, and that's what we
Yeah.
say when we're encouraging people to get involved with foster care. As churches come around and say, "We're going to support this family," just take a step, take a meal, do the smallest thing,
Yeah.
give them a ride.
Everybody can do something.
Everybody can do something. Just take a step,
Mhm.
and then that will lead to a next step and a next step, and then eventually you look behind you and go, "Wow, how did I get here?"
Yeah. Well, Greg and I are action-oriented people, so this is the call to action.
Yes, absolutely.
Take a step. Get involved. I love it. Okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
and
having me.
sharing
This is
your
fun.
Story. I do a lightning round. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this.
I am familiar with a lightning round. I hope you're
Okay,
familiar with stuttering and bumbling too. So
we've kind of been stumping people at the same question point. So we'll see how this round goes for you. Okay, but it's 1 minute to answer as many questions as
oh
you
my
can.
gosh. Okay.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. What season best fits your personality?
Spring.
A lot of spring. What's your most used emoji in text?
Most use emoji. It's probably boring. Just the thumbs up.
Okay. What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
I have mentioned it over and over again, and that's the book Visioneering by Andy
Visioneering
Stanley.
by Andy Stanley.
And I also love the movie Dead Poet Society. I liked it a lot more as a younger person than I do now, but it was an amazing book.
Both good. Okay. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
In high school, I was in music, and I played rhythm guitar and bass, and I had just an awesome mullet. It was awesome. And I'm glad they're coming back.
Please send a picture of that and
I've
we'll
tried
post
to get
it.
rid of all of those.
We'll post it with your podcast link. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on.
Oh my gosh. Gasoline doesn't count now, does it? Sorry.
Yeah, really.
Everybody does that.
Gasoline.
It is probably, I don't know if it's too much, but I love having experiences. So traveling and doing different things. And now as you're driving anywhere, it's expensive, but it's always been, that's where we've always put our money. If I ever look back and say, why is the retirement account not as full as I thought? Oh, do you remember that trip here and that trip here? Those things.
But so many memories. that
Oh
you
my
created out
gosh,
of
just
that.
incredible
I think it's
memories.
worth it.
Yes.
Awesome. Very good. You did well. Very good.
Did I
Got
get the
through.
stumper?
That one usually throws people, and the next question, what celebrity would you want to play you in a movie? That's usually where we kind of round out.
Oh gosh, that is I hate to say this in a minute, but probably Jim Carrey.
Jim
That's just because of physical looks, maybe. And
I
I can relate to Dumb and Dumber.
Oh my. Wow. Well, thank you again so much for being
Thank
here. This
you.
was wonderful, and
Lots of fun.
definitely
Appreciate
have
it.
to have you back as well.
Very good.
That's all the time we have today, everyone. Until next time, shine bright, everyone.